Taxation Chair. This meeting is called to order, and I invite the audience members to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And the following board members are in attendance. We have Kathy Lewis, Cinta Schmitz, Terry Lind, Dave Anderson, and Robin Richards. And also in attendance, we have our superintendent, Dr. Doug Van Zyl, and our executive cabinet members. We have Dr. Emily McDonald, Tony Maceras, oh, there he is back there, Bill Holmgren, Stephanie Cass, and Dave Haveman. So with that, we will move to good news. Superintendent.
Actually, have the truth.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. We have the truth and taxation that we have right now. So, this is the moment for Bill Holmgren to present truth and taxation hearing for the payable 23 tax levy. And following his presentation will be time for public comment, strictly in regards to the truth and taxation portion. Bill.
Madam Chair, members of the school board, yes, each year before we bring the levy to the board for certification.
Can you talk into the microphone a little bit? Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Each year before we ask for certification of the levy, we have a tax hearing and go through the details of that levy, along with touching base on a couple other pieces we need to touch on by law. First of all, we do need to talk about the district budget, which we will do this evening, and then we have to stand some time for comments from the public. So I'm going to start, though, talking a little bit about the background on school funding. The state of Minnesota is responsible for funding schools. And so here in Minnesota, what they've chosen to do, of course, is to fund part of our schools through taxation. We get a very large portion, through income tax, but then we get a smaller portion through the property tax, which we'll talk about in detail tonight. Of course, because of that, it's a very, very highly regulated process. So formulas, many, many different formulas. You will see all the different revenue streams that we will talk about tonight. But we have many formulas, and most of them are based on our pupil count, so many dollars that we get per pupil. Of course, then there's tax policy, and then there's a maximum authorized property tax for each property parcel. Okay. One thing to remember is that the education formula lags inflation. As you know, we've been going through a very large inflation time. Everybody knows that the state of Minnesota has some funds on hand that they have not distributed, but the budget we're in, we got 2%, and we know that inflation's running 7 to 8% this past year. So it's very difficult for us to keep our programming in place just the way it is because our funding is lacking. So for the fiscal year we're in, we just started. We got an increase of 2%, like I said. It's $135 over last year per pupil unit. So it brings us up to $6,863. We would need another $1,263 per pupil to keep up with inflation from back from 2003. That'd be an 18.4% increase. So we're hoping the state of Minnesota would do something about that. So you can see here, the red dotted line, of course, is what we're receiving. And if we would have kept up with inflation, we'd be on that blue line. You see there's a difference there of $1,263 if we would have got inflation, just simply inflation on a yearly basis back from 2003. Special education, another area where we're definitely underfunded. For 2020, you see that the state of Minnesota, we're underfunded in special ed by $673 million. For Lakeville, for our school district, that is $12.3 million. So when you talk about some of our budgets and issues that we have, you can see if we would have been funded with what we need, we'd have plenty of funds. Mm-hmm. So now the estimate going to 2025, the state then looking at an underfunding of about $806 million, which brings us up to 14.7. So, so what happens? Since it's underfunded and it's mandated that we have to take care of our special education, we have to subsidize these programs by our general education funds that we get from the state of Minnesota. So either we have to subsidize or we have to do some type of a referendum to the public to increase our revenue to cover some of these programs. Okay, like I said, the levy is based on many, many different formulas. And of course, not only the formulas, but approved referendums for school districts across the state of Minnesota. One thing to remember really is if we talk about new money, our levies, we're going to talk about some that went up. But lots of times these are offset by decreases in our aid so that our actual dollars that we get for a particular line item is the same from year to year. It's not really an increase. And we can't change those formulas. It's all set by the state of Minnesota. So again, an increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an increase in the budget. Now, the school district's a little different than cities and counties where they budget on a calendar year. So as they're bringing their levies forward right now, their levies match their next year. So the budget that they're presenting this month will be what they're spending next year. Now, for the school district, of course, we run a fiscal year that goes from July 1st through June 30th. So, of course, we don't have a budget yet put together for fiscal '24. So the budget we touch on tonight will be the current budget we're in '23. But the taxes we're talking about tonight are for the '23-24 school year. Okay, we're going to talk about the budget first. And again, I talked about, we're talking about only the current budget because we don't have the budget in place yet. You know, we have many funds that we work through when it comes to school districts. We're a fund accounting. The general fund, of course, is where most of our funds flow, and that's where we'll primarily look at the budget here in a couple minutes. Of course, we have a food service fund that's self-supporting. We either get support from the federal government or we sell meals to make up enough revenue to pay for our food and our labor costs. Community education, again, pretty much a self-funding fund. They have many, many programs that they charge fees for. There is a small levy portion that they get, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. Building construction, if we are going to build a new building and we're going to sell bonds, all the money goes into the building construction fund, and it's separate from any general funds, and it flows through there. And then, of course, debt service. As we have bonds that we need to pay, we levy funds that go into the debt service fund, and we make the payments on those bonds. And just a quick point of interest here on debt service. Actually, the state allows us to levy 105% of what we need to make those payments, to make sure that if someone doesn't pay their taxes, or we have a lot of abatement that we're dealing with, we have enough to make those payments. And as that fund builds up, gets to a point where we actually give the money back if we have too much. We have a small trust fund. We have some scholarships in for our high school students. And then we have an internal service fund, which what that is our insurance. We're self-insured with both our dental and our health insurance. Our health insurance, we're going into our 4th year on that. So that's new for us, but it's working out pretty well. And we're starting to build that fund, which you'll see here in a little bit. So let's talk about general fund, and we'll talk about revenue and the changes from 22 to 23. Our other, you see, is down a little bit. This really has a lot to do with we don't have as many funds on hand as we have, so we have a lot less interest revenue coming into the district. You see that's down a little bit. Our state sources, you see we have a $7 million increase. This is due to two things. Number one is that 2% we talked about. We get 2% new money from the state of Minnesota, but we also are growing. So as we have more students, we're getting funds for those students that we enroll, and that's running between 2.5% and 3% on a yearly basis right now. Property tax. We'll go through the details, of course, on the new one for fiscal '24, but many different ways, many different revenue streams that change this around. But of course, last year, this one we're talking about here, a lot of this change is the new building that we brought in, the new borrowing we did for the new building. We're paying for the first payments this year. And federal sources, you see that shrinking, but of course, all of the funds that we receive for COVID during the pandemic were all federal funds. So that number's been shrinking the last couple of years, and we're down to not many left for next year. But of course, what else is in there is we have federal funds for special education, and we have the title programs that also run through this area. But just a small point here, as I said, we got some money from the state of Minnesota directly, and we have some money that's property tax. So when we look at our general fund, 24% of the funds that we have in the general fund are from our property taxes. So a relatively small piece of the pie, so to speak here, when it comes to taxes for the general fund. General fund expenditures. You can see here salaries and wages are up about $5 million, a little over $5 million. This is pretty close to what runs on a regular basis each year, as we've had pretty much our programming in line the same. Benefit costs up about the same percentage. Our purchase services, again, there were some services here that we purchased with COVID funds that are going away. So you see a decrease here. Our supplies and materials increase about the same as we see on a regular basis when we look at a percentage increase, and our capital expenditures are down too. Again, for equipment pieces that we had that we used from the pandemic. And then some others that we're not spending as much on. So we are seeing an increase in our expenditures from last year to this year of a little over $6 million. Now I want to touch on the other funds. Student nutrition. This is the first year we've seen a small decrease. We haven't saw this lately. During the pandemic, we actually had a larger reimbursement rate from the federal government. And remember, everybody got free meals the last couple of years, and those rates that we received were higher than what we normally get. So they have really built up a really healthy fund balance. Actually, we're right to the max that we legally can even have. We can only have up to 6 months of the previous year's expenditures, and we're right at that level. One thing to point out here too is because we have a large fund balance in Fund 2, they are helping us with the new building, as we've been having some budget issues, finding enough money to do that all the equipment needs for the new building and food service is coming from this fund. Community education, they are still recovering from the pandemic. As you know, their fund balances were very healthy before we started the pandemic, and it really got bought down because of labor costs, and we had a lot less revenue coming in. But they are balanced, so that's good news. They're on the recovery road. Building fund, I mean, you see we're going down in our fund balance by $28 million, but that's normal because we've already sold all the bonds for the building, and now we're spending those buildings. And it's not only the new building that is here, it's also our LTFM funds run through Fund 6, anything that we borrowed. Debt service, again, we're only bringing in what we need. You see that's actually a little decrease there because we had some excess funds in that fund. Internal service fund, yes, where you see a small increase. We're almost up to $5 million now in that fund. We're looking to get up to that about $6.5 million before we can really do some buying down of our premiums for our health insurance for our employees. The trust fund, again, this is just a little interest we're receiving on the scholarship money that sits in that fund.
May just want to explain, because I know you used LTFM.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Remind everybody what that is, and then probably just a quick reminder of what internal services are, even though I know you touched on it a second ago, but just a clarification of both those maybe.
Okay, first, LTFM funds are long-term facility maintenance funds. It's actually a relatively new program in Minnesota. I don't think it's 10 years old yet, but the state of Minnesota really saw that the maintenance on buildings was really starting to be a problem in school districts, so they developed a program for us to get funds to take care of that. And actually, we've taken care of a lot of, really updated some of our buildings here the last few years, which is very good. And then again, on the internal service fund, that's for our self-insurance, both dental and health. And like I said, this is just finishing the third year on our health, and it's gone very well. You can see the volume there of almost 29 million in premium that comes from ours. But we have like almost 4,000 participants. I mean, we don't have 4,000 employees, but they have family members and spouses and so forth. Yeah, we serve about 4,000 different people when it comes to our health insurance. Okay, now we're going to shift over to the levy for the pay 23 levy. And we're going to compare from 22 to 23 and talk about the changes that happen. And then we're going to talk about the impact and on taxpayers. The process of actually doing the levy, we don't have a lot of control in what we do, but it does sit in the county and the state's level. So the city or the county assessor, they determine what your particular property is worth. The legislature sets formulas on the tax capacity of how much funds that could be not be taken, but to be charged to you, to your property. And you see that in Minnesota right now, our tax capacity is at 1%, up to $500,000. And if you're over $500,000, it's 1.25%. If anybody here has got any farm property, that's based just on their house and garage, not their whole farm. Okay, the county auditor then, of course, they calculate the tax capacity for every single parcel in their particular county, so they can spread it. The legislature sets the formulas and the levy limits. Once we have those, then the Minnesota Department of Education puts together all the formulas and gives us all the limits of what we can actually levy when it comes to school levy. So again, number 6 here, you see that the small part for you is to adopt that levy, but it really is controlled by the state of Minnesota. And then, of course, once that's done, the county auditor takes the dollars that we're levying and they spread it across all the property owners in the county. If this looks familiar, it's a property tax statement that you should have received by now, and it will show last year's and this year's amounts. It's not only the school, but you also have the county, the city, or a township, wherever that you might live. So this gives you a pretty good idea what's happening to your property. Okay, I'm going to walk through the levy now. There's different components. This first portion is our unassigned component, and it really is our operating referendum pieces. Now, there's an equity revenue that the state put in many years ago, and what this is for districts that do not have operating levies, they're able to levy up to a certain amount. They call it an equity. So let's let them have some type of levy instead of just a zero. And you can see, because we have inflation built into our operating levies, so that our operating levy is actually growing. That's why you'll see here in equity revenue, we actually are seeing a small decrease because we're not eligible for as much since our levy is higher. Transition, small amount of dollars, but something that they put in place many years to keep schools held harmless in this particular area. So we get $14,000 for that.
Bill, I'm sorry, can you explain that equity revenue again?
Equity revenue, okay, let me back up then. The state of Minnesota has recognized that they are not funding schools at an adequate level. Okay, so they've allowed schools to go out to the voters to get operating levy. For districts who cannot get one passed or have not asked to get one passed, are still allowed to levy a small portion to increase their revenue. Okay, it's actually a very long formula. But the reason you're seeing ours decreasing, well, let me back up one more thing. If we were to the cap, if we levied the total cap that's possible by state law, our equity revenue would be zero, okay? But of course, we're not to the cap, so we get some of the equity revenue. But of course, it's decreasing because our regular referendum's increasing. So
Because
that
of
formula
the inflation
balances.
factor.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So the second piece here, the local optional revenue. This is another area where the state has said you can levy up to, I think it's $740 per pupil unit without going out and doing a levy. In our case, where we had operating levies, they took those amounts that were in our operating levy and just put them over into LOR permanently. So that amount is there permanently for us. We don't have to go out and ask for a renewal on that portion of our operating levy. Now, when we look at our actual referendum here, really is our operating referendum. You're seeing a relatively large increase here. And it's due to really 3 factors. The first one is last year, we had a negative adjustment because of our decreased enrollment during the pandemic. Because as we brought forward the estimated pupil counts, we went ahead and levied those amounts. Well, our enrollment was less than that, so we have to give the money back. So we had a negative adjustment last year. So as that negative adjustment went away, that automatically increases our levy for this year. Secondarily, we have an inflation factor built into our operating levy. So the Department of Revenue determines what that percentage is. Over the last few years, it's been relatively small. 2 years ago, it was 1.9. Last year was 1.85%. But we got that as an increase to our operating levy. Well, this year, when you see all the inflation that's happening, it's actually a 10% change. And that's when we're seeing a very large increase or change in our operating levy here. Because it's not only for the year we're going into in '24, it's also going back and adjusting '23 up the year that we're in. Because the inflation happened during '22 and '23. So again, the increase that we're seeing here, and it's by far the majority of our increase for the levy, is here in our referendum at $5.7 million. So certainly helps us going forward, but of course, it doesn't fix all our problems.
So just to clarify, we don't get to decide that. That's all formula driven by the state, just because I think some people think that the board or you and I get to sit down and say, well, we need more money, so we get to make that adjustment. That is all driven by a formula from the state. And part of the catch for this particular year is due to the dip that y'all had last year with COVID. And so now they're backfilling that gap on top of the new increase, correct?
Correct. That's why we're seeing a bigger increase here than we would have regularly. So maybe go back and touch on, too, the differences between the city or county and the school district. The city, when they set a budget, they go and say, well, we need these many funds, and they find out what that tax rate is, and everybody gets that tax rate. We don't do that. We can't do that.
We can't do that.
We have maximums that we can levy, and it's all based on the student count that we actually serve. So that's why we see some of these adjustments, because if we don't anticipate exactly the enrollment, if we're off 10, well, then next year either goes up or down because of that.
And the difference is that we're working with 3 budgets at one time because of how all of that is being distributed as well.
That's true. This adjustment here is really based on the fiscal '22 year, fiscal '23, and of course, our future year, fiscal '24. Okay, again, that first portion we just talked about, that's all unassigned. That's what we can use in our classrooms for what we need for programming. We move now to restricted components. These are dollars that we receive, but we have to use them for a certain reason or a certain program. So our achievement integration, first one on the list. We've had that many, many years. There's actually 2 components to this. Remember that this amount is actually only 1/3 of the total. The state gives us aid of about 2/3 of this total. So we get about $1.5 million on this grant. But of course, it can only be used for achievement integration. That grant is written by Lydia of what they're going to do with those funds, and that's the way we have to follow that. Safe schools, that's been around for a few years, and it's kind of morphed into different things. But we do get $36 per pupil unit for that. And we use it for our SROs, we use it for chemical education, and some security items. Again, we have to use it for those purposes. When you look at the third one, District 917, of course, District 917 doesn't have any levy authority. So all the member districts levy on behalf of them. So they get $15 per pupil here, and then we transfer that to District 17 for those purposes in District 17, 917, sorry. Vocational. This is a formula that has changed many, many times over the years, but it doesn't come close to covering our vocational needs, but it does help mitigate some of the costs of vocational needs. And over the last years, the staff here have found some areas where we can get a little more reimbursement than we have in the past. So that's why you're seeing an increase here in the vocational here of $150,000. Reemployment during the pandemic, well, we didn't really have any unemployment. As you know, if we do have unemployment, then we can levy that cost. So it's a zero-sum game for us when it comes to our revenue. But last June, I got a bill for over $100,000 during that last whole period. Again, we forward this forward, and it goes to the levy so that it covers that cost. And of course, it's after the fact, but that's what that is. Q-Comp, this program has been around here for a few years now. Again, this is 1/3 levy, 2/3 aid from the state of Minnesota. Our OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, and what that is for it's severance for our teaching staff. In our contract, there's different severance pieces as they retire that we pay for a little period of time. Again, this is only what we actually spend. So again, what we do is we have a actuarial comes in and does all the work, so we have an estimate of what we think that's going to cost in a particular year. But at the end of the year, if we spend $10,000 less than we thought, well, then we give that money back to the taxpayer. Lease levy. And our lease levy covers part of this building. It covers across the street the community education offices and ABE classrooms. Our track 2, a small piece of that is in our lease levy. And of course, the additions we put on our elementary schools, that payment is here. Along with the payments that we work together with the city of Lakeville on the ice arenas. If you know, they just did a brand new large project, and we're helping now pay that back. We are at the max there. We've talked about that. Our lease levy is actually a few dollars higher than that, but as our enrollment grows, it's based on a per student, so it will cover here very shortly. Same thing for lease levy for District 917. They have buildings that they're leasing, and we levy to help them out with those costs. Abatement adjustments, as you know, from time to time, a taxpayer will go to the county or to the city and say, hey, I think my taxes are too high, and they go through a process, and sometimes they'll get their taxes lowered. That happens, and of course, then we're shorted our funds, so we're allowed to come back and levy for them the year after, so that we're held whole when it comes to the total of our levy. Now we'll talk about the capital components. And we get operating capital. Again, this is a formula also that is split. We get aid with this. Small increase. We get a small tick every year up because all our buildings are 1 year older. And it's based on our student count. It's based on the age of our buildings. Again, we have LTFM here. Over the last couple of years, we've shifted a few more dollars to this area instead of borrowing all the funds that we need. You're seeing an increase here of $900,000. But that's money we will not have to borrow to do the LTFM funds, the projects. And then our capital projects levy. These are funds that we use primarily used for IT, the devices for our students, and then the STEM programming for equipment needs, and then a small security piece. And now this is the only area in our levy that's kind of like the city or the county, because it's a rate. The rate's the same every year. So as the net tax capacity increases, we get a few more dollars, and that's what you're seeing here. Okay, community service. We receive funds from the levy based on our population. And this is based on the 2020 census, and we just get a straight $5.42. So I'm not sure where that number came from, but that's what we get per people that live in our community. Youth service, we get $1 there. Our population of our district is actually at 60,904 people. And then the after school is another formula. That's where we get a straight $1.85 up to a certain amount, up to 10,000. Anything over, we get 43 cents. So I can't tell you where those numbers came from, but that's how those numbers are figured. Early childhood. We do get funds for early childhood. This does fluctuate a lot each year. Lots of times the aid portion and the levy portion kind of go back and forth. But here's pretty flat this year. You see that we're moving up to 280,000. But there's an aid portion to this too.
Does that change based off of population of the children in our
Yes.
district? Okay.
Yes, it does. Our home visiting, that's actual cost up to a limit. So that 68 is what we actually spent the year before. Disabled adults, this is a flat rate that we've had for many, many, many years. And then the school-age care. Now, this is the one area that we have us change from what we talked about way back in September. If you remember, we had a relatively large negative adjustment in this area because during the pandemic, all of a sudden we didn't spend as much money because we weren't servicing the students. But the state of Minnesota allowed to hold that program harmless for a 2-year period. So we don't have the negative adjustment any longer. So you see that as the same. Small decrease, but the same. And then a few abatement adjustments here. So overall, the community education's really, I mean, it's down 5,700, but it's flat for the year. We talk about debt service. You're seeing some increases here in debt service. This is intentional. When we sell bonds, we assume that net tax capacity grows over a period of time. So we try to set up the payment schedule so that as that goes forward, this grows, but it doesn't affect taxes for our community. They pretty much stay flat because it's spread over more people. And we've said that before, especially in our community that's growing so fast, we have many, many more, much more value in our property in our district than we do the year before. And it's up 7% from the year before. So you look at this change, it's about flat. Now, one thing I want to, here's just bringing all three of those components together. So the general fund, the community service, and debt. So you'll see that we're moving from $62.5 million last year to almost $72 million this year. So an increase of about $9 million. This is larger than we usually have. We talked, and it's mainly way back to the top, our operating levies and the inflation that's figured into those. So we're not going to see these big increases again next year. This is kind of a catch-up over the last 3 years on our operating levies. One thing I did want to touch on, other cities and counties, you know, what are their increases? You know, what's happening to some of these other areas? Because it's interesting that the city of Lakeville is up 12.5%. So it's substantial. It's close to what we have going on. El Canoe Market's up over 10%. And Credit River is up over 42%. So this inflation is hitting all of our municipalities across the state of Minnesota. Now, so I want to touch on a couple of the bigger pieces. So again, our operating referendum and our LOR, the net change there is $6 million, and that's due to the inflation hooked to our operating levies. And then the other big piece, of course, is in debt service, the total debt service. So it's the portion of payment for LTFM that we have borrowed in the past, these payments, and then, of course, our regular debt and the LTFM portion. We're actually very fortunate as a larger school district in the state of Minnesota. The LTFM program gives every school district in the state of Minnesota $380 per pupil. But for us, we're held harmless from the old plan where we can go out and levy for the dollars that we need for the projects that we put in place. So again, that's what's driving these numbers here. Yes.
One of the things that we had talked about previously was with that particular fund is there had been quite a discussion is that we do a pay-as-you-go that we do every year and not bond for it. It looks to me like we're running about 50-50, and so I'm assuming that that's a strategy we want to continue.
Yes, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
We're trying to keep that rate, the tax rate, as flat as we can.
Okay.
So, like I say, the big change this year is our operating levies. That's what's really pushed this up. But everything else has been relatively flat.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay, I want to talk about, taxes. How do they affect the taxpayer? There's many factors that do that. And one big piece that's happening this year is the value of individual properties. As the last couple of years, as you know, many houses were selling for much higher value than anybody ever anticipated. Well, now the county is catching those amounts up. And if you remember, we talked about the sales ratio back in September. So they actually tax us at a rate where they think your house is worth, not necessarily what it's appraised at. Okay. Of course, the other things that change are our state funding formulas and our operating levy. That does make a change here. So I'm going to take a couple minutes and look at taxes and how they've changed over the years. And what we're going to do is first, we're going to talk about an example. If your house did not change at all in value, what happened to your taxes? And then there's an average of properties increasing 37.2% since 2020. But that's a big number, okay? So you can see, if you look at most of our housing run down the line of, 350,000, 400,000. I mean, we certainly have houses that are worth more than that. But if you look across the line on the $400,000 value, you see over that 3-year period of time, taxes actually went down $410. So it's hard to believe that when you look at some of your.
But that's just for Lakeville, right?
Oh,
I'm in
yep, I
Burn-
wanna back up.
I'm in
Our-
Burnsville, mine went up.
Yeah. The majority of our property is in Lakeville, city of Lakeville. So yeah, these examples are that because it's like 85%, okay?
I just
But
wanted
yes,
to-
I understand that we have Credit River and we have a lot of value going up there. So it's going up faster. And of course, we have Elko New Market also.
But you're using this as an example if your assessed value stayed the same, that your taxes.
Your taxes actually went down if
Right.
your value
Right.
stayed the same.
And I'm just saying mine didn't, so, and a lot of people's didn't.
Okay, and I think for most people, go back and look at your valuation, what the county has changed your assessment. I think that's majority of your changes. I've talked to different people. I think we're seeing about an average in Lakeville of about 7% increase on school taxes. So I don't know where you sit. It could be different. When we look at the actual, I picked out, again, a $350,000 home and a $400,000 home. You see how those taxes over the last 4 years have actually fallen if your value stayed the same. Of course, so we move ahead and look at where you do have the increases. There you're seeing an increase. So on a $400,000 home, if your value went up that much, you are seeing that almost $300 change. But everybody is going to see something different depending on your piece of property.
And Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but that slide that you showed earlier that said, hey, everybody has probably seen a copy of this because you got mailed your taxes. It's not just school district taxes that are on there. So when people see that total dollar amount and it changes, it's not just driven by us. It's every taxing authority within their boundary is on there. So when they see that, they just can't look at the bottom line and say, oh, well, all of this is school district
Correct.
driven.
Right.
That's city, county,
Yeah.
other municipalities that have the ability to tax, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And again, these examples are only school tax.
Right.
They're not county, city, or township.
And I'm not saying that they didn't go up because of the school district, but I'm saying most
No,
of
but
it's,
that's a
most
good-
of it's
that's a
formula
good-
driven.
that's a
And and the other components they have to take a look at is what else did the other taxing authorities do within their ability to make adjustments?
I really appreciated the slide that you had that had all of those different bubbles on how the taxes are assessed and determined, and that very first step is what we're seeing right here, which is that assessed value that creates the biggest fluctuations that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, couple things I want to make sure people are aware of. There is a Minnesota homestead credit refund. Of course, your income has to be below $116,000. It's built on a sliding scale, and the maximum refund to homeowners is $2,800, a little over $2,800. It's also available to renters, so don't forget to fill out your M1 PR at the end of the year if you're under that income amount, because there is a tax credit there for you for your property tax. There's also a special property tax. If you have a large increase in a particular year, and it's over $100 and at least 12%, you can get a credit up to 60% of that increased amount. It's only for 1 year, up to a maximum of $1,000. So that's something people, if they see some big increases in their property taxes, something they certainly should take advantage of. This is something else that's available, especially to our senior citizens. If they're trying to be on a fixed budget, you can plan on what your taxes are going to be. Okay, so if you're age 65 and older, have an income of $60,000 or less, you can defer part of your taxes. You must have lived in, owned, and homesteaded your property for the last 15 years, and what it does is it limits your maximum amount of property tax paid to 3% of your household income. But the key is these taxes are deferred. They're not forgiven. So someday in the future, if you sell the property or if a particular owner passes away, that tax has to be paid at that time.
Plus interest, it looks like.
Yeah, plus
So
interest.
you want to make sure you tell your kids
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, tell your kids if you did that, it'd be a surprise. So that's all I have to present this evening. We now need to take some time and allow for public comment if there's someone who wants to do that.
Yep, so this is the opportunity for our community members that may have public comment specific to the proposed levy that's presented. Is there anybody that wishes to make a comment? Please come forward. Did you have the comment cards for them to fill out? Okay, so we're going to need your name and address when you're done. If you could leave your name and address
Certainly will.
with Kim, that would be appreciated.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm Bruce Haverly, 331 Maple Island Road, Burnsville. And maybe this was very enlightening. We've been in the district for 31 years and been the beneficiary of a great school organization, so thank you for your service. It was helpful, Mr. Holmgren, to describe how that levy is calculated and that kind of thing. It doesn't soften the blow for a lot of us as we're looking at our tax statements. And I just wanted to try and understand, when we did get our tax statement, we got this little thing from the county that said 5.26% for the school district, which obviously maybe that's just part of it, or the operating part.
Wait, you're gonna have to wait to respond.
Okay.
So finish your comment and
Great.
then he'll respond to you at the
Super.
microphone.
And then trying to understand I've never looked at the budgets before, but I went online to the school district and it shows net is 14.77% for the levy that's proposed. Now, as probably others have seen on their tax statement, some of our levies are much higher than that. Ours was over 19% for the school district component alone. That may be driven by valuation, I'm not sure, but I don't know why that isn't a uniform 14.7% across the board from that standpoint. Like Mr. Anderson being in Burnsville, our Burnsville components went up 27%. So all the people in our neighborhood are looking at 20+% net taxes, which isn't sustainable on a long-term basis, especially for a lot of us that are retired now and trying to keep going from that standpoint. So just trying to understand that, and it appears that there isn't a lot that the school district can do with this calculation and the algorithm that they use. But I didn't know that was the impact, so thank you for
So
explaining
thank you for your
that.
comment, and then we'll have,
Could you just repeat your two questions, so Bill?
Yes.
Maybe, do you understand what he's asking, Bill?
I have one.
yep.
Okay. The first one was basically why the difference in our assessment versus the 14.77. A lot of us in our neighborhood are well in excess of that. I guess that's really the main question that we have. So, thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think she went to get the card.
Yeah,
so
she
when
went to
you come
get the
back-
card
thank
for,
you.
yep.
Okay, real briefly, again, when we talk about the budget this evening, it's the current year's budget. So when we put out the information on the budget into the letters that go out, or the statements that go out, it's this year's change in levy. So that's where the 5% is coming from. Again, Yes, we're at 15% increase on our total dollars that we're levying. But most people, if you look at our net tax capacity and how it's growing and how we have so many more properties coming on to the tax rolls, that most people are seeing much lower than that 15%. And they say most people I've talked to, at least in the city of Lakeville, it's closer to a 7% increase, like half, because of that increased tax base.
So the card that he got that said 5% is based off of this year's
Yes.
budget?
Yes.
And the 14.7 that
Is for
you just were talking
next.
about is for next year?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did that answer your
But
question?
didn't I hear him say that he had 19%? Isn't that what you said, Bruce?
27.
That's out of Burnsville.
That's out of Burnsville.
Lakeville schools was 19%
Yep.
versus a 14.7, so I'm not understanding why that differential. Does everybody go 14.7? Obviously not.
No.
No, the 14. The 14% or 14.7%, that's just a total increase on our taxes. So when we look at the total of our tax levy for next year.
You have to talk into the microphone.
Last year we had 62.5 million, now it'll be at 70, almost 72 million. That change is the 14.7%. But because of the net tax capacity changing in the district, most people are going to see less than that, because we have more people paying tax than we did last year. Because
Yeah.
our total doesn't change. The total
But
amount that we tax.
The
does not-
difference does vary
Yeah.
per property. So that's what the district is experiencing and showing. But the difference varies per property, depending whether you're in Dakota County, Scott County, Burnsville, Lakeville, Elk Market, whatever. So our increase is the 14.7% or whatever for the next school year.
I would look at your evaluation, I would think that's probably where you're seeing your big change. I don't know, because I don't know your property. But
Is there other
If we
public,
see, large changes in properties, more than what we talked about.
property
that-
values?
Yeah, more than that 37% we talked about over a 3-year period. If you got more than that, your taxes are gonna go up higher than what we talked about.
Correct.
There was one more.
So, yep. Is there other public comment? Yes, please come forward. And if you could please complete a comment card too when you're done. Thank you. Your name and address, please.
My name is Ben Pierce. I live at 18142 Headwaters Drive. So a few things. So I looked at the video the City of Lakeville put out with the candidate forum for the school board election. I heard a lot of comments. Lakeville schools are great. One candidate mentioned.
Is this
that-
in regards to the property taxes?
I am getting to that, yes.
Okay.
So I also heard 44% of Lakeville students are not passing at least one of the Minnesota State Standards tests. So if a private company underperforms, eventually they go extinct. But with state schools, government revenue, the property taxes will keep coming regardless of how they perform. I don't plan on sending my kids to the Lakeville School District, but I will pay property taxes for the school district regardless. I paid for a $200 homeschooling curriculum called.
What is your question in regards to your property tax statement?
My question is, how can I opt out of paying property taxes for the Lakeville School District if I don't use the school system, if I'm schooling independently?
You'd have to take that to the state of Minnesota, who dictates the rules around the local government bodies. So that's all dictated at the state level. So that's where you would need to go. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we will then move on to the rest of the agenda, and we'll move into good news.
All right, thank you. You mean that tax levy information was not good news? We could have just continued that whole thing. That's it.
No, the lesson learned was I'm moving in with you.
Maybe we should have done good news and then the property tax stuff.
All
So,
right.
but a couple of things. So we do have an opportunity to announce the district's 9th elementary school name. If you remember, in July of '22, Lakeville area schools officials broke ground on the 9th elementary school located on Highview Avenue in Lakeville. Thanks to our community support, we'll have this new school to accommodate the growing enrollment here in Lakeville area community schools. But we did put the power of the decision-making of the name for the school within the hands of our students. And we do have a little bit of video, I think, that we're going to roll here, if the gentleman in the back hear me, for us to take a look at. Maybe.
Yep.
They said they could hear me when I.
In July 2022, the district officially broke ground on its 9th elementary school, located on Highview Avenue in Lakeville. Thanks to our community support, we will have this new school to accommodate growing enrollment in the Lakeville area community. We put the power in the hands of our elementary students to decide what this new elementary will be named. Take a look at the video that was shown at all of our elementary schools to share the exciting news with students and explain how the process would work.
We have some exciting news to share with our elementary students.
The schools in our community are so great that we have lots of new kids moving into our community so they can come to school here.
Our school district is building a brand new elementary school so everyone can have a place to go to school.
This new elementary school will be located on Highview Avenue in Lakeville, and it's going to be awesome, just like all the rest of our schools.
It will have space for kindergarten through 5th grade classrooms, special education classrooms, and music, STEM, gym, and art classrooms, and more.
Construction began in July, and the new school will be open in the fall of 2024.
Here's where the district needs your help.
The school district has put the power in our hands. You get to come up with a name for the new elementary school.
A good school name is meaningful, easy to say, happy sounding, and something that will make you feel proud to go to school with them. It should also be school appropriate.
Each elementary class will pick their top 3 favorite names, and teachers will submit their classroom's ideas to the leaders of our school district.
As you come up with name ideas, remember to have fun and be creative.
Thank you for your help in naming our district's new elementary school. Stay tuned to learn which name was chosen.
Some of the names we came up with for the new elementary school include Love and Bubbles Elementary,
Farview Elementary,
High Hopes Elementary, Beautiful Learning Elementary, Learning and Fun Elementary,
Cold Stone Elementary,
Sunshine Elementary. And now for the top 3 names.
Tied for 3rd place, King Park Elementary and Northview Elementary.
In 2nd place,
Highview Hills Elementary.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for.
The name of the district's 9th elementary school will be
Highview Elementary won with a landslide victory. More than 50 of our elementary classrooms submitted this name. It's clear that our elementary students know what they want. Highview Elementary. We look forward to opening Highview Elementary in the fall of 2024. Thank you to all of our community members, families, and staff for your continued support.
To see that they can be involved in the process. And so now you have Highview Elementary, which will go on the documentation and everything that we have going forward. So thank you to our staff and students for being involved in that. Some other good news, we have an Inclusive Educator Award, and so congratulations to employee Rachel Fitterer, who was nominated and selected for the Intermediate School District 917 Inclusive Educator Award for the 2022-23 school year. This award is given on behalf of District 917 and its 9 member districts, including us in the Lakeville area schools, and then they recognize exemplary employees who work to support the inclusion of unique learners that serve in our community, in our school community. So congratulations to Rachel on that outstanding award. A couple other awards. We have the Excel Award nominees. So we have 4 high school juniors that are being nominated or nominees for the high school Excel Awards. This is the Excellence in Community Education and Leadership Recognition Program and is designed exclusively for 11th graders who are active in school activities. They show leadership qualities and do volunteer work in their community. Lakeville's North has a nominee, Ima Kawaja and Quinn Power, and Lakeville South nominees are Haley Eastling and Owen Johnson. The statewide Excel Award recipients will be selected and announced in February, and hopefully one of our lucky students is selected for that great honor. So congratulations to them and all their hard work. And that is my good news for the evening.
That's awesome. Thank you. And what a fun video seeing the kids' participation. Steph, thank you and your team for taking care of that for us. That was fun. So just under board communications, again, just want to remind everybody that the Board of Education will continue to host 2 stakeholder sessions per month on the 3rd and 4th Tuesdays. The 3rd Tuesday of the month prior to our board work session, and the 4th Tuesday of the month prior to the regularly scheduled board meeting. So just want to make sure that people know they can go onto the district website and register on the Monday before by noon if they're interested in participating. And then agenda additions, we do have agenda addition. It's going to be recognitions at the end of the meeting. And with that addition, do I have approval for the agenda?
I'll move.
I have a motion by Director Schmitz, a second.
Second.
Second by Director Lind. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda for further discussion? All right, hearing none, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Lewis. Second?
I second.
Second by Robin Richards, Director Richards. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And our report for this evening is from the demographic study from TeamWorks, presented by Ray Queener. Welcome.
Thank you.
More good news.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Van Zyl, Executive Cabinet, thank you for opportunity to be with you. I can think of nothing better to follow a truth and taxation hearing than a full comprehensive demographic and enrollment analysis report. I was sharing with Kim that that was my 24th truth and taxation.
Oh my gosh.
So I did 13 as a business manager, 7 as a superintendent, and 5 just
Hanging out.
random.
Yep.
So I don't think there's many.
Well, we'll see you here next year if you're interested again for your
well,
25th.
If Bill had any issues, then I could have stepped in and helped out. So. The reason that we're here is that the school board and the administration have asked us to come in and provide an external analysis on demographics and enrollment analysis, primarily to continue to understand and confirm what we know or what you know about your information, and primarily for short and long-term planning and around facilities, finances, and academic programming. So that's the reason why we are here. That's the wrong way. That was a fast report.
Yeah.
So this is,
Is it backwards?
I might need some support.
Yeah, because that's the end.
Oh, I started at the end. All right. You guys thought you were done early. All right, there we go. Nope. Well, I'm going to do this. Give me 1 second. We'll do the speed report, and then we'll come back through. How's that? There we go. So when we looked at the information, what we wanted to present is information around enrollment, around housing, and around facilities. And the approach that we took is that we would look historically, we would take a look at present day, and then into the future. And so I'm having all kinds of problems.
You're just keeping our attention. It's all
What's
good.
that?
You're just keeping our attention.
Yeah,
It's all good.
absolutely.
You want to start over?
So we're going to look at historical first, and we're going to start talking about enrollment. There's a lot of data that I know is in the report, much more than possibly kind of be absorbed in a verbal presentation. So we're going to hit highlights and kind of talk through a few things. Some of this you may already know. Some of this may just serve as reminders, and then there may even be pieces that you were unaware of. So if you look at the historical enrollment chart, we're going to focus on the top line. I want to point your attention to the growth curve in the early or the late 90s and the early 2000s. That is the most aggressive growth the district has seen since 1998-99, and I point that out because when we look at projections, the slope of the projection curve actually will be greater than what you experienced in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so otherwise, since that point in time, since about 2006-07, you've stayed fairly stable with a little bit of an increase in the last few years. When we look at the preschool and specifically the early childhood special education enrollment, you've seen a significant increase across time. We are continuing to gather information and finalize projections around early childhood non-special ed enrollment, but those numbers too have grown. The correlation is that as your births grow, so does your 0 to 5 population that take part in the early childhood programming.
Do you want questions at the end or as we go along? Because I don't want to slow down your
Yeah,
presentation.
there's 80 slides.
Yeah.
So you don't want to wait till the end. So stop me now.
Okay.
I'd
back?
rather have you go through the presentation
Okay.
because, unless you
Okay,
think
no,
this is
that's
going to
all
be
right. No, I
addressed.
can
Yeah.
make
That
my
doesn't
notes.
really work for me because if we're on something, I want to be able to ask that
I
question.
know, but if there's 80 slides, it's going
Well,
to.
we're taking time right now doing that, so.
So if
there
you
a
would,
question?
if you would continue, and then let's just listen for a little bit and ask questions every so often.
Maybe in between sections?
Yeah, just to make sure,
Okay.
because I don't want to keep holding you up if you're going to be addressing it.
No worries. We looked at the open enrollment outbound, and we coupled that with populations also attending charter schools. So open enrollment is students choosing other public schools, whether they're in the district as a charter school or your neighboring districts. And so you've seen a growth over time of that 99-2000 to the present day of open enrollment out, and you've seen a increase in the last few years. You're going to see this trend in several of these slides, and this is primarily due to COVID. We've seen differing, many school districts having differing trends in the last couple of years, primarily due to COVID, and you'll see that in a couple of other slides. Your open enrollment in, too, has increased over time. And again, that variable changes. You've seen a decline the last 2 years, but primarily that is an impact of COVID. Private school enrollment, a significant increase in the early 2000s, and then a drop right around 2007, 8, 9. We also see this trend in other districts. A lot of that had to do with economy. And as the housing market impacted, we had the recession, and parents were choosing other than private schools. Or in the case here, there may have been a private school closure that could have had an impact. We didn't go back and investigate that detail, but the trend around 08, 09 did follow the economy, and we see that. In the later years, the increases for private school, again, that was typically primarily due to COVID. So parents choosing other options depending on what school districts had put in their mitigation response. So that trend at the end for the private school and also for homeschool is very typical in the districts we serve. Again, parents making choices based on COVID response or COVID conditions. So we've seen increases in all of those areas. Your 917 enrollment too has increased over time. Of course, as you grow, that enrollment increases. But one of the things you will see And the next slide is a very significant growth in special education in both K-12 as well as early childhood special ed. Not different than the trends that we see in other districts or others across the state. And when we talk with special ed directors, some of the disability percentage growth are actually greater overall than what you see just in this trend.
Why is there data missing?
That's a great question. It was not on the MDE site. So we don't know what happened or where it is for 2000, 2001. And we didn't spend time investigating, but the blue and the red dot would be somewhere right in between those two because of the trend. But yeah, it wasn't there.
So
Well-
are there, before you go on then, that was all the open enrollment information, or the enrollment information. Are there questions about enrollment then?
I do have a question.
Yep.
I'll try and make it quick. So that when you were calculating the significant increase in the ECFSE, and you said due to the birth rate, but were you able to parse out whether how much of it was due to moving in?
We did not.
Okay.
No, we know that as populations grow and as birth rates grow, there's going to be more 0 to 4-year-olds.
Okay.
And typically when there's more 0 to 4-year-olds, they're participating in early childhood programs in addition to early childhood special ed.
All right. I'm just thinking for future planning, if we could base it on however many.
Well, yeah, there's a challenge to that because somebody could buy a home because they want their kids to be a part of the school district, but they may not have kids when they move here. So
Absolutely.
you'd have to have some type of survey with them once they purchase the home in order to know that.
Well,
And
we would
and that's
know
why
if
they
they-
use the birth rate, I think,
Yeah,
information.
we would know if they were here versus, I mean, if they weren't here and then they were living here and had the child, that would be the birth rate versus somebody moving in with twins, you know. when the
Yeah,
twins are
and
2 and
it's
3 years
really,
old.
sorry.
No, when the twins are 2 and 3 years old, because I know of circumstances like that, and those kids are not in our ECSE programs, they're in others because of daycare, blah, blah, blah. So that's my only, to me, it affects the planning for a new elementary.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't want to debate it, I
Yeah,
just.
Robin? Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
When we look at Lakeville Area Schools' market share, and we define market share as the number of resident students or the percentage of the resident students attending a Lakeville area school. So not necessarily, it doesn't have to be their neighborhood school, it just has to be a school in Lakeville. And you can see at the top that you hover right around 90%. That's one of the strongest market shares we see in our work. And as we've seen in 2021, 21, 22, the dip in market share is again primarily due to COVID and a bigger dip at the elementary level. And that trend exists in the districts that we work with. But by and large, you're about 90%. We're going to see in a couple of maps later where specifically are you strongest in market share and where are there places where parents are making other choices. You're going to see a couple of these graphs twice, or tables twice, because we're showing here historical perspective, but also you'll see on the right that we do have the 2027 projection. This table is coming from the U.S. Census data. And what we're seeing, if you look across the diversity of the population, is a growing diversity of non-white people. And so people of color are growing at different percents, and that trend follows, you'll see your student demographics, your population trend is following that student demographics. Similarly, you have an aging population. So when we look at the 0 to 19-year-olds, when you compare the 2010 percent to the 22% and the 27 projected percent, you're shifting from 33% in 2010 to 26% in 2027 for the 0 to 19-year-olds. And the 65 plus, a shift from 6.7% in 2010 to 14.7%. So almost double, a little over double in that population. Again, very similar trends statewide that we see with districts we work with. The school demographic, again, you see that you're primarily a white school district, but those percentages are shifting. And if you look across the percent changes in all other races, there's continued growth in all those races. So your population is becoming more diverse. We also have seen significant increase, especially in recent years, in free and reduced, as well as special education. And you're following that same trend. And then finally, I know that you were presented some information earlier this fall about the limited English proficiency and the number of languages that are of students that are coming into your schools. And so you can see, even though comparison, the bars are smaller, there's been a significant growth in those populations as well. When we look at the birth rates, this is has a lot of information on it, but the Lakeville line is actually the black line that starts at 600. So if you find 600 and move to the right, that's the Lakeville line. And I point that out because compared to your neighboring school districts, the slope, especially in the last 4 or 5 years on birth rates, you are actually more significant growth in birth rates than your neighbors. Yes, there's more births in Rosemont and Gamble Valley, more population, but your slope of your line is more significant.
So can I ask if there's any questions about the demographics or the birth rates before we move on?
The only thing that I'm wondering is,
Kathy, can you pull the microphone
oh,
closer?
I'm sorry. That's all right. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to shift to housing trends. What we did is we looked at both houses built and houses sold, and we did that by decade. So what you're seeing on the screen is a heat map, first at 1980 to 1989, and you can see where the intensity of the new homes being built are in the far northeast corner of your school district. During 1990 to 99, that heat map grew intensity and in geographical space. So you were building more homes. As we look at your schools, and when your schools were built, that corresponds to you were building more homes, you were also needing more schools. We started to see in the late 90s, if you look to the very south and west corner, Elko New Market area, starting to see some growth in that area. And as you look across the years, you're going to see continued growth in your south and west. That's the lower left-hand corner. And that's shown in the 2000-2009 map. 2010 to 2019, a little bit smaller geographical areas, but there still was some pretty intense builds and developments in Lakeville proper area. And then finally from 2020 to present. So we still see growth in the Lakeville proper area as well as down in the southwest corner. As you would expect, then when we look at sales, we see similar patterns. Again, this is a heat map of the how many sales were in each area. Lakeville proper is the strongest. As you look at the legend to the lower left, from before 1990 all the way through 1999. 2000 to 2009, a little bit less around some of the core Lakeville areas. But when you look at 2010 to 2020, that picked up pretty significantly, both in the Lakeville area as well as your southwest corner of your school district.
I think, yeah, that's unbelievable.
And then finally, 2020 to present, and as you know, the housing market was booming. the last couple of years, so we see that reflected in your school district as well. It's not as intense, but you also see to your west, kind of straight west of Lakeville South, those areas, you can see that there's still development. It's just not as intense as Lakeville proper.
Yep, questions
Okay,
about the growth?
So with the not having as much intense, are you going on like number of houses or whatever? Because like just the area west of 35 and west of Lakeville South, those homes are usually on larger homesteads. They're not necessarily in neighborhoods, or if they are, the neighborhoods are 2.5, 3, 5 acres each. So does that make any kind of a difference? I mean, I know it does for density, but,
It does for density, yes, yeah.
okay.
But when you're doing the heat maps, if you've got 200 homes in Lakeville proper and 10 homes, out west, the Lakeville proper is going to show a stronger heat map because there's more volume.
Okay. One question that you might not know, but it just makes me wonder, do we anticipate, especially with the changes in Credit River, any possibility of, or did you get any kind of inkle of maybe conversation about lowering the size of the properties that were going to be sold? Because it used to be that you couldn't build or have a property unless it was, I don't remember, 5, 10 acres or something like that. You had to have that, or you were not allowed a building permit. However, when I look at some of the developments that seem to be going there, that's not holding. So I would imagine the density would be increasing as we move forward.
Yeah, the only thing that we have for information is what are current active developments.
Okay.
So they would already be platted and they would be in progress of being developed. And then future developments, so they're already established. So however that, whatever parameters are around those future developments, they would exist, but we're not aware of if there's a change or
Anything yet.
requirement that would cause a developer to have to redesign their development.
Okay. Can I go back to my one question that I just thought of real quick? All right.
But Kathy, can you talk into the microphone?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Or just pull it forward.
When you're talking about the number of births and how they're increasing, and we had had a historical dip, were you able to have any access to our previous demographics to see if what you're seeing is what was actually foretold previously? Because we did expect to have a dip in the number of older students and then it to rebound. And the only reason I'm wondering is if there's any correlation between your numbers and what we did 10, 15 years ago.
We didn't specifically study that.
Okay, that's all right.
I think the one piece that I would offer, just from an outside perspective, is that when you look at your enrollment at your elementary level, the predictions the district made in terms of what need there was legitimate in terms of the new school. Because when we look at our capacities and your enrollment projections of your elementary schools, you need a new school.
Yeah.
And so those forecasts were accurate to the degree that when they were communicated, I think the bond was 2019? For the new school? 2021. Okay.
Sorry. Don't know why I
Thank you.
said 19. Sounded good.
They agreed with you.
I agreed with you, I don't know.
Okay.
So we're going to shift and take a look at building information. Again, there's more in your packets you can look at, but just wanted to make you, again, aware of, you may know a lot of this, but you look at the years constructed for your elementary schools. You have 5 of your 8 elementary schools are constructed 1990 to 1999. So that corresponds to the growth of your houses being built and sold. And you have a couple of elementaries that were right around the 1960 era. When we look at acreage, by and large, you're fairly consistent in your elementary acreages with the exception of Orchard Lake. The John F. Kennedy Elementary, of course, is co-located with McGuire Middle School. So we don't show that separate acreage, we just show that in the middle school acreage. In terms of square footage, here's how you compare, again, fairly consistent across all elementary schools with the exception of Orchard Lake. It's a smaller school on a smaller site. And then I did denote where the additions are that were built for each elementary school. So you can see reference to the square footage that's there includes the most recent additions. And if you actually look at the total square footage of all the additions, that's just about the size of another elementary school. So you've actually increased your capacity. You'll be increasing your capacity, a full new elementary as well as with the additions. So, and then here's the current capacities based on the information that we had at the time. I do know there's a current capacity study that's being completed, so these will be updated and revised. But as of the time of the report and the analysis, these were the capacities that we had.
And I would just add, the reason for that being done now is programming. Because programming for special needs classroom and other things, counselors and therapies and all those, that weren't there necessarily when buildings were built, that has an impact on your total capacity, because you need to have those programming needs. That takes more space than you think it does, and so then just your regular programming doesn't have the capacity that it once had.
What's the planned capacity for Highview Elementary? Ooh, it's fun to actually say that name now.
700.
700, okay.
We look at middle schools, 3 vastly different aged middle schools. Again, you may already know this, but there's a 1950s, a 70s, and a 1999. The acreage, Century Middle, McGuire Middle, and the Kenwood Trail Middle School. There's differences in the acreages, although my understanding Kenwood Trail has more land, but it's not necessarily buildable or usable space. It's green space and, is it marshland or swampland?
Wetland.
Golf course, isn't it?
Yeah.
Golf course.
Frisbee
Disc
golf.
course.
Hilly. Total square footage ranging from 144,000 to 188 across the middle schools. That's going to be important when we start talking about projections. Here's your current capacities between 1033 and 1142. Again, it's just based on the square footage and the size. These are going to be revisited based on programming. High schools, you have 2, you know that, 93 and 05. Pretty significant difference in acreages between the two. 75 at north and 133 at south. Square footage, there's not a significant difference in square footage. And capacities based on our information at the time, 2,400 and 2,300. Two other facilities that we looked at, Area Learning Center, built in 1954, and then Crystal Lake in 87, the Crystal Lake Education Center. Area Learning Center is on an acre, and Crystal Lake is on 23. Square footage, 13,000, and then just under 80,000 at Crystal Lake. And capacity based on the programming, again, at the time we did our work, it's currently being revisited, 400 at the Education Center for their programming and 200 at ALC. There's a few other facilities the district has. Bill mentioned that earlier in the lease levy portion of the Truth and Taxation. You lease space for the district office, the place we are currently at, and the Community Learning Center, as well as the Community Ed office, and then your facility maintenance, facility and storage located on Pillsbury. So those are part of your conversation as you look at long-term facility needs, in addition to capacity for schools. So this is the so what slide. These
Can I
are
just ask the board, do you have any questions about the building and building capacities? All right, thank you.
So here's what we see. When we look back in time, historically, your enrollment has grown about 30%, which is about 1% per year on average. And that'll be important to remember that 30% number as we talk about projections. The pandemic impacted the 2021 and 2022 school year, or 2021 and 21-22 school year, very typical to other districts. The 115% increase in early childhood special ed since 1998. increase in an open enrollment in and out, and again, we'll have to watch that over time as we come out of the pandemic and see how that plays out. Your homeschool enrollment, again, probably likely due to COVID and pandemic, increased. Special ed, you're following trends, state trends. Again, the market share, with the exception of 1 year, you're hovering around 90% as a district. And again, we'll talk more about present-day market share. You've got the shifting age and racial demographics, not unlike other suburban school districts. The note of the birth rate. So not only are families moving here, but also families are coming here to start families. Parents are coming here to start families. So, and then increases in free and reduce and special ed, as well as limited English proficiency. So your population is shifting. Your demographics are shifting. 70% of the homes in the Lakeville area schools were built since 1990. I think that's just an important statistic to just know how fast you have grown. You experienced the same trends as the 2008-11 housing crash. Development slowed, but you notice it didn't stop. There was still activity in those decades. And you have growth in the south and the west, Elko New Market area. And again, your sales up to present day, mostly around Lakeville area or proper, but you have other portions of your district that are growing. Out of your facilities, I already mentioned that 5 of them were built from 1990 to 99. Orchard Lake, we know, is the smallest. 6 of your 8 elementaries have capacity between 700 and 885. Crystal Lake Elementary became the early childhood center in 2011. And you have an age difference in middle schools. Again, as you upgrade facilities, that comes into play. As does the size when we start to talk about projections. That will be an important factor. And I mentioned the capacity study, as Superintendent Van Zyl mentioned, is in progress to give you better information there. Questions?
Quick question.
Any questions about the findings?
Do
Yes.
capacities reflect the class size caps that we have established as protocol?
The guidance, or not
Yeah.
caps, the guidance, yeah.
Yeah, so it's based on how we're using the space primarily. So, and Bill and Superintendent can chime in, but basically if you have a regular ed classroom that has 30 students, but that is a program for a special ed classroom, technically you have a capacity of 30 or 30 plus kids, but we're only programming in that space for 8 to 12. So we're capturing, or when they're doing the study, they're going to capture that differential. So we're counting the space as it's programmed for.
Okay, that makes sense. I got it.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions about the findings?
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. Since McGuire, I think, was originally built as a high school, and then Kenwood Trail was built as a high school. And I know that we took that into account when we built Century. At the same time, I think that there's some facilities at those 2 schools that we obviously don't have at Century, like an auditorium. And so I just think that that's going to be important when we start considering whatever programming we're going to be offer, whatever limitations or expectations of what we can offer at different schools, just because of the facility.
Yeah, that's not necessarily part of this component, but
No,
that's the
that's-
conversation about when we get to the task force that we'll be talking about,
Yep.
that they'll have conversations about.
All right. Any other? All right, thank you.
So present day, this is a snapshot of your enrollment, pre-K-12. Now pre-K, we only have early childhood special ed, as I mentioned. This is the largest enrollment in district history. So you have reached, you've crossed the threshold from where you were a few years ago. And as you'll see, you are not only at a high point today, but you're at a low point in your near future. So your growth, based on projections, of course, is dependent on many variables, but you are, the slope of your growth, as we'll see in projections, is going to be more significant than the late 90s. In terms of your grade span enrollment, you can see how that breaks out between K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So you've got a large elementary bubble that's coming through the system, as well as a larger 9, 12. I would say that 6, 8 number is lower, but we have seen some trend where people are moving in with middle school students. So I'd put an asterisk above that as we watch your development.
And several of the private schools and charters that have come out, like they come in for high school.
Correct. Yep. I know this is a little bit small on the screen, but I can orient you by, if you look by color, this is your elementary market share. And again, market share is the percentage of students living in those shapes that attend a Lakeville area school. And so the shapes you're seeing, or the colors you're seeing, are all census blocks. And so when we look at market share, we're actually capturing each census block and then calculating a market share rate. So the darker the colors, the higher the market share percent, which then draws your attention to those larger census blocks to the south and to the west. And those are your lower market share numbers. In Lakeville proper, by and large, you're 75% or greater at the elementary level. When you go west and south, that percentage drops off. When we look at the middle school market share, the trend continues, although the numbers are a little bit greater in those census blocks south and west of Lakeville proper. But by and large, in Lakeville area, the city of Lakeville, you're very strong market share. Yes, sir.
Can we just look at, is there one more market share? Can we look at all
Go
three?
ahead.
Yeah, let's look at the rest of the market share, and then we'll ask questions.
Okay.
And the high school is your strongest market share rates. So even though the south and west is lower than core Lakeville proper area, it's higher than it is in elementary and middle school.
All right, Director Lind.
The elementary in the southwest corner being quite low, could that be a result of a lot of parents live closer to the new Market School? It's a new Prague school, elementary school. And from what I've heard is that they go there in elementary, then they transfer over for 6 through 12 because of the distance to travel from Elko to JFK.
I don't have the breakdown of the numbers. I just know, if you look at 61% on this presentation, what it's saying is that 39% are attending somewhere else.
Right.
They're just not coming here. So it could be homeschool, charter school, other public schools. They're just not coming to Lakeville. So we didn't break that apart in each
That's fine.
census
We
area.
have some of those numbers. Bill and I have looked at that, and it is a fairly good chunk. It's just a little under 100 kids, I think, elementary-wise, that are going to New Prague. They also have the plans to build middle school on the same property as their elementary school.
Yeah.
So they're figuring out how to grab and hold that market share for their district, which, if I was in that position, I would do the exact same thing. So I can't blame them.
Yep.
But that, I think, is what Ray is trying to show you, is that in those areas, there is potential for additional growth on top of the development, because if you recaptured that market share that's leaving, that exponentially increases the growth in those particular areas.
And in those areas, that's where you have the biggest potential for growth.
Yep.
And it is growing.
Right.
Yeah, when you drive
Right.
down.
You have
yeah.
potential and you have growth. At some point, your Lakeville proper it will be built out.
Any other questions on the market share? All right, thank you.
Same two graphs. Again, now we look at present year 2022. This is a profile of your demographics by race, but it's the same chart. So because we did historical and current, we're just focused on the center of this. This is a current profile, and then similarly on the age demographics, a breakdown by age range. and then your school demographics. So the charts are the same, but as you're going through, we're focusing on historical, current, and then future. So nothing new in those. Current housing information, when you look at the graphic, again, we're looking at elementary attendance boundaries are the colors, and the stars represent current development. So these are active developments. They are already plotted, and they are being built out at varying paces. The online tool that we provided the district, you can actually hover over a development and know exactly how many homes are built out. The service that we subscribe to updates that quarterly, and it's live data to the district. So as that data gets updated, the district's able to monitor that development. We've talked a little bit about the new facility. It opens in 2024. There's a couple of pieces that the district will need to has to pay attention to regarding the opening of the new school. I didn't know the name till tonight, so I didn't include it in the slide. But I think it's important to note that this is your first new school since 2005. Mm-hmm. So you're continually growing. So what did we see in current? Largest pre-K or early childhood special ed through 8th grade enrollment in district's history. And this is actually a low point for the next several years. You have a bubble at K2, you have a larger one at 7-12, and an asterisk on your middle level that we'll continue to study. Strong market share, one of the best that we've seen in districts that we work with, but opportunity in the South and West. Your shifting age and racial demographics, and then your increased population. So similarly to what we've seen historically, continues in your current information. Those housing developments, there's 35 active housing developments, and those stars are 35, which is important. That's 1,361 new homes, and you can see on the screen how many are single family. But I think it's also important to note that there are 13 active developments just outside of the district boundaries. So overall, if you look within a mile radius or a mile of your boundaries, you have 48 active developments in progress today. So not only are you growing, but right around your border is also growth. The new elementary school, opening in fall 24. We talked about the 5 additions briefly, and the capacity study is in progress. More on that to come. So questions before we move on to future?
Any questions on these findings? Thank you.
So let's talk about the future. So we just talked briefly about active developments. What you see on this screen with the stars are future developments. So these are, they're organized, but they haven't been fully plotted, and they are not underway. And so you still see, and some of these are fairly large developments, not as many of them in the district, but again, they're out there in the 10-year forecast, or the 10-year forecast that we're projecting. So we need to monitor those as well, because that can have another impact on your growth. When we look at the census data, and again, the numbers are too small to see on the screen, so you need to look at the colors. The lighter shades are the lower or negative % growth. Now, in the census data, they are not as sensitive to the development information as our projections are. So while this doesn't represent that your census population is growing when you add in the demographic information around housing developments and birth rates, which the census doesn't take into account, we're showing significant growth, which you'll see in a moment. Similarly, at the middle level, a little bit more growth, and remember I had said that asterisk around the middle school students, so your census data is actually showing a growth in middle level age students. And we would project that even to be stronger with housing, increased housing developments and new students coming. High school, flat to little growth. In your total population, again, we're looking at this from a census perspective, so we're not factoring in all those other variables. You can see the pockets where you are expected to grow as 20, 23%. That southwest corner, right around 17.4% in the Elko New Market area. So where there are darker colors, the census forecasts you to be growing significantly there as well. Now, when we shift to the future, they're really enrollment projections. And one of the things that we do, we capture all the variables that we've talked about in our projections. But you understand that enrollment projections are like weather forecasts. And so someone who forecasts the weather 7 days from now, they give you an idea of a trend, but it may not snow next Thursday exactly. It could happen on Friday. It could happen on Wednesday. It may not happen at all. So we use our best information. We try to add as many variables as we can to the forecast to give you an idea. And actually, we present them as a range, which I'll talk about. So in this presentation, this is looking at your early childhood special education through 12th grade. If I direct your eyes to the 22-23 school year is where you're currently sit with early childhood special ed at 11,849. Our modeling, we do a 5-year detail projection and then another 5 years of trend line. And the red line represents your birth rates and cohort survival gains. So that's just taking what, when a third grader becomes a fourth grader, that's a cohort survival rate. And then we add in new birth rates. So no new additional housing is added. If you add in all the housing development and they hit the targets, you could be at 16,388 by 32-33.
Wow.
So you just can look at the slope of either one of those lines and see that's much more significant than you were in the late 90s and early 2000s.
It's over 500 kids a year.
Below the chart, if you look at those percentages, that is your facility utilization based on the capacities that we have at this time. These will be revised when new capacities are put forth. But overall, when you look at the district, again, based on what we have, you're space-wise, and this does factor in your new elementary school, if all the developments happen and all of the forecast happens, you're at 106.5% of capacity. And typically, we don't start to advise districts to get too concerned until you start getting over 110 into 120. So collectively, K-12, you look okay. But as we go through the grade span projections, and again, you see the 2-line representation. So at the early childhood special ed through 5th grade modeling, you could be anywhere between 6730 and 7195. And when you factor in your new 700 student elementary, even at the maximum, you're only at 100% in 10 years. So you have capacity at your elementary schools, assuming all this holds.
Once the new elementary is built.
Once the new elementary is built and opened. Your challenge is actually more at the middle level. So if you look at the maximum 10 years out in 32-33, you can see you're at potentially 3905 to 3678. And now your middle school is hovering at that 120%. That's starting to get critical. And so when we had presented the acreage and the size of your middle schools, that may be a solution you consider to address some of these. But this is an area that you probably will focus on first. High school, you're at about 107% of facility utilization. Again, if we look at the maximum number, 5288, and you have space if you were to look at additions at the high school. Now, again, this is all based on the current trends. You know, a 5-year period like the previous 2 or 3, that could change everything. So what did we find? You actually could add 1,600 new students through new housing and market share if we took every census sub-block to 80%. So if there was a strategy of your south and west to bring some students back to increase those percents, that could add 1,600 students to your school district. Almost 2,000 single-family homes and about 850 townhomes are planned by 2026. You're growing in the south and west. Your overall population growth is about 3,700 by census projections. Your demographics are shifting, your age population are shifting, and your birth rate is the strongest of any of your neighbors. Remember when I had shared the enrollment of your historical being 30%? So in 23 years, your growth was 30%. We're projecting that you could be 30% in 10 years, in half the time. So that slow growth that you experienced in the late 90s and 2000s into the teens, you could achieve potentially in 10 years if everything holds. We did do enrollment projections for each of the buildings, although it's not valid data for facility utilization because we don't know what the boundaries are going to be for the elementary school. So they'll look over capacity if we presented the information until we shift boundaries to move those students around. Your middle school, as I mentioned, is your first priority. We're seeing the significant growth. Is that a common message? You're growing? You've grown and you're growing. I think I make that point clear. Your facility challenges are at your middle and then your high school. You will need to do boundary changes to open your 9th elementary school, and some other strategy to kind of right-size boundaries and use that as an opportunity to create more contiguous boundaries around your schools. We got a lot of growth potential in the south and west, and that the capacity analysis will impact your facility utilization. So I know that wasn't quite as riveting as a truth in taxation, but.
Any other questions with
better
the
targeted tone.
last slides, or any overall questions? All right.
I have one. Why is it that it's only when it's above 110% that it's critical? Like in my math brain, I'm like, if we're above 100%, like that means every space is full.
Usually, if we're following trend, and if we see it or get to 110% and we start projecting growth, you have enough time to react and respond to that. But you know, if it's been hovering at 110 and you're not seeing a significant growth, you know, we don't rush out and build an addition, or you try to respond accordingly.
It just clicked for me. It's the fact that this is a projection, like you said. It's a weather forecast. So once we're getting into those, you're basically like limiting the standard deviation of that's going to be what's happening, and you need more time in order to adjust. Like that is making sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I didn't mention this, is that the investment that the district made in this modeling, so there's a lot of investment in putting all this data together. Now as we go year over year, it'll help us follow projection to actual.
Okay.
And we'll keep testing that methodology and refining it. And you know, as a business manager for 13 years, one of the hardest things I had to do was project enrollment. And we actually work with districts not to try to do a numbers game on enrollment projections, but actually a strategy game.
Yeah.
So we look at trends and we look at, you know, kind of where you're headed, because you're always wrong if you try to hit a number. Right, Bill?
To go with that quick, if you don't mind, David, is that you also have to take a look at the facility's purpose and use. That's why that capacity study that we're going through is important, because as somebody mentioned, you had a couple of schools that were built as high schools that are now being used as middle schools. Well, I can tell you, walking in some of your schools, you've got classrooms that are probably not up to what the standard size classroom for today would be, knowing what we know about how you educate kids. So you're trying to put 30 kids in a classroom that really should be designed for a class of 22. So even though it may say 110%, you start feeling the effects of that probably, in my opinion. Once you start pushing 90%, people are going to be like, man, we're full. You know, I don't know where we're going to put another kid. And some of that is, and we hear some of that now already, based off of the different square footages that we have in some of our classrooms as compared to the buildings that were all built in the 90s, all have basically the same size classrooms. But your other outlier buildings with age create that. So, and to Ray's point as well, you don't want to wait till you're at 110%. You need to be planning for, what does this look like? How do we proactively plan for this so that we're not having to impact academic programming? Because that's what happens, you know, and I think Dave can tell you that, from when, as a building grows, you pull back on some of your special education spaces that were meeting kids' needs now aren't able to meet needs because you had to put another classroom there. So you don't want to lose that programming edge as well if you wait until that point. Does that make sense?
Yes. Director Anderson, you had a comment?
Just a real quick question, not to put you on the spot, but I know their projections.
Can you please speak into the microphone too?
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
But then you lean back.
I know. What is the error rate on the software? Do you have?
We don't have it for our first version.
Okay.
So as we work through and work with the district, we will be able to refine that, because every district is different.
Okay.
You know, there's districts where we were projecting within one student at by school, by grade level. That's pretty accurate, but that's not every situation, and there's dynamics. The projections are strongest in the metropolitan area, primarily because of the databases and the data sources that we have access to. When you get outstate, your assumptions have to vary a little bit. So I would say that within a 5-year projection, we're probably not too far off, provided the economy and everything stays on the trend it's at. But we're smarter next year, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
Can I just add one more thing to
Absolutely.
what Doug mentioned?
Yep.
One of the other things that we're seeing is not only how spaces are used, but especially in buildings that were designed for 30 desks. That doesn't necessarily mean they're designed for 30 pieces of flexible furniture, which is more popular in current construction. And so that's another factor that goes into how many students you actually will be able to put into classrooms. It's called FF&E, but the fixtures, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment change.
Yep.
My only other comment that I would make is that we had talked about having this done. I know it's a lot of information. Ray went through a lot, and there's a lot for you to take a look at, but I would hope that you do. And if there's something that's not there or doesn't quite make sense, I need to hear that from you, because that's what we're going to be using and what you're going to be using to make decisions moving forward. So we want to make sure we're providing what that information is. So as you take a look at that, if you see that there's something else that's not there, we need to know that.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ray.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're back to Bill with the certification of the Pay 23 tax levy.
Madam Chair, members of the school board, Superintendent Benzo. Yeah, tonight I need you to take action on our Pay 23 levy in the total amount of $71,930,368.35.
So is there a motion to certify the Pay 23 tax levy?
So moved.
Director Lewis, second.
I second.
Second, Director Richards. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And the second recommended action is approval of the 2022-24 collective bargaining agreement with SEIU Local 284. Tony's last presentation to the board.
Last issue paper. Well, this is good news also. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, we had reached a tentative agreement with Local 284, which represents our custodial and maintenance employees, and the union membership ratified it yesterday. So tonight I'd like to bring forward a recommendation for the board to do the same. The details are spelled out. I think like a lot of the negotiations we've been through recently, they're probably a little more challenging than they've been in the past. We negotiated, and I want to acknowledge Bill's help. Of course, we worked as a team on this. Nearly 4 months of negotiations and 2 all-day mediation sessions, but we got there. Right. And I think that that's an accomplishment and testament to the willingness of both parties to reach an agreement and to compromise to get to that point. Following the pattern that we had, there's annual 3% increases effective July 1, 22 and July 1, 23. One of the challenges we face with this group is the reality of the labor market that we're in right now. And so we took some steps and measures to address that. For example, eliminating step 1, so we have a higher starting wage. And then we made some other adjustments to compensation to deal with that. Those would probably be the main highlights. I think one other one to point out, like we did with other groups, is we've added the Martin Luther King holiday. So all of our employees will also be off along with our students on that day. So I think that's worth acknowledging as well. And I guess just finally, as an employee group, I think this group does a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't see. And the outcome is we have great learning environments, we have clean, welcoming buildings, and they're responsible for it. And I think their work should be acknowledged.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
So with that, I am recommending approval of the contract as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Oh, okay, we have a motion by Director Anderson and a second.
Second.
And we have a second by Director Lind. All those, or any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, before you leave, I know we're going to do recognition a little bit later, but from the board, we really appreciate everything. I don't even remember how many years it's been now that you've been here, but for me personally, just helping me understand all the complexities that you deal with how many different union groups do we have?
Probably 7 or 8.
7 or 8 different union groups, and the things that you have to do to manage, negotiate, and handle all that. And we're the largest employer in the city of Lakeville with how many employees? Roughly?
About 1,800.
Yep, with 1,800. And so with what your department has dealt with and handled over the years and through all this growth that we've been dealing with, not just with our students, but with our staff and everything. It's just, your work has been unmeasurable, and you, just like Local 284, a lot of what you do has gone unseen. Appreciate everything that you've done, and we are truly, truly going to miss you, and we wish you the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add,
Yep.
too, that staffing is a challenge, and it always has been a challenge, and you've worked with the principals, because I can vouch for that, being an ex-principal, to really make it as fair as possible. So I've always respected you for being that way. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Terry.
other comments?
I'd love to make a comment, but I'm just going to ditto what you all have said. I mean, I think that everything that has been mentioned, I have to heartily agree with, and I appreciate all the service that you've given us in the district.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, and I negotiate for a living too, or did, and I know how hard that is. So I appreciate all the work you've done and enjoy your retirement.
Yeah, so thank you, Tony, for
I
everything.
appreciate that. I appreciate the individual recognition, and I know this sounds like a cliche, but it's really true. This is about a team.
Yes.
And we have
But
an
it's a
amazing,
team that you've built.
Yes.
I helped. Yeah. Sorry, that's
I'm
just
gonna
my
give you some credit
personality.
here,
I don't
Tony.
do that. So, but seriously, I appreciate it. It's been an honor to work for this district. It's by far the longest one I've ever worked with, and it's a great run. So I feel good
Well,
about
thank
where
you.
we're leaving things, and the future looks bright. I
thank
really
you.
believe that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, and then the last recommended action is the resolution for establishing polling places. And in the board packet, it lists all the places. There have been no changes to what the polling places have been. And so with that, is there a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Lewis.
I'll second.
Second by Schmitz. All those in favor, or any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then with the additions to the agenda, we have a few recognitions as this is the last board meeting of the year. And we have Director Lewis, Director Schmitz, and Director Roberts all leaving us at the end.
It's Richards, Judy.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I knew I was going to say that, even wrote it down so I wouldn't.
My maiden name was Zakowski, and I swear, you all, Robin Richards is more confusing for people
Yeah, I
than
know it.
Robin Zakowski.
I know it, thank you. So, anyway, but with their terms all coming to the end of the year, we just have a little recognition we like to do.
So if I could have you three come forward, that would be fantastic. Don't
Right
come out of
down.
your chairs, come up front here.
No, just go. You can do that later. Rob, Cinta?
Stand where people can see you. Yeah, in front, yeah, you can
Yeah,
stand
right
in front of
here.
me so I can see you, and you can, all right. So on behalf of the Lakeville Area School Administration and the Board of Education, it's my honor and privilege to recognize the three outgoing school board members this evening. Director Kathy Lewis, Director Robin Richards, and Director Cynthia Schmidt will be leaving the school board at the end of this month. As this is your last public meeting opportunity, I'd like to take this moment and thank each of you for your extraordinary dedication to our district and service to our students. Director Richards and Director Schmitz joined the school board last year to complete the terms of previous board members. We sincerely appreciate your year of service and leadership during this time of change, including supporting the district as it emerged from the pandemic, the development of the new strategic plan, and hiring yours truly. So, Director Lewis has been a member of the Board of Education since the 90s, which amounts to 7 terms on the school board. During this time, she served in several district advisory councils, committees, and task force to help all of our students achieve success in the Lakeville area school. So thank you to Director Lewis for dedicating 29 years of your time, talents, and support to our Lakeville area students. So I have a little something that I'm going to give you, but I need you to stay there. So I'll send it down.
Here, come on over here. I know.
Actually, they give you these little things if you want to wrap them.
Here, Cinta.
Strong school board leadership has never been more critical in this current day and age, and so we appreciate each of you for serving as advocates for our public schools. As a small token of our appreciation, I just presented you each with a little plaque which has something on it which I think says it all. By word and deed, your presence has enriched the lives of our students and served as an example for all. So thank you for everything that you've done. And congratulations to your next step. So thank you.
So thank you. And Director Lind, do you have a few comments do you want to make?
Oh, regarding, okay, I just have a couple of things. I was thinking about each one of them, and I tried to write a couple of sentences describing how I felt about them. Robin, I'd like to thank you for all that you've done on the board. I really appreciate that you are like a sponge in learning the role of a board member and collecting information regarding the issues that we faced. So you added a lot to our discussions. Cinta, I appreciate how you looked at all sides of an issue before any decisions were made. You truly represented the Lakeville community that you served, keeping our students at the center of all your decisions. I remember that. And Kathy, I will miss your wealth of knowledge in a number of areas. When faced with decisions, we could always count on you to provide a history of how and why decisions were made in the past in similar circumstances. And to all of you, thank you for your service. I wish you the best in your future endeavors. I miss you all.
Thank you. Dave, do you have a few comments?
You said that beautifully, Terry.
Want to read my
No, I'll just agree with you. But I do want to say to the new board members, I appreciate your enthusiasm and excitement. And Kathy, I appreciate your dedication to the school district for so long, and I hope you enjoy your retirement. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Terry. Those are wonderful words, and it really encapsulates the three of them. So I really appreciate with Cinta and Robin stepping in at a very challenging time to just fill a short one-year term. And you dove in head first. You did everything that you needed to do in the fastest mode ever to learn and embrace what this role is all about. And you came with the focus of our students and public education and our kids in the district behind all the decision making. We all lived through very turbulent times, and the appointment and the campaign showed that. But this past year, for what this board has done to bring together and really focus in on our students and our district is just extraordinary. And I've been very honored to work with this board as a whole, to work with the three of you over this past year, and everything that we've done is really pretty extraordinary. So thank you. Thank you for stepping up to fill that one-year term. Kathy, thank you for your years of service here. And again, it's just been really a great year working with the three of you, so I really appreciate everything you guys have done. So, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to say, Robin?
Well,
Robin Richards?
Yeah. You all hired me, right? And for better or for worse, I brought 100%, and this was an extremely fulfilling piece for me that felt just so rewarding as a person who started as a classroom teacher and has been in so many different roles in public education. This has been a service that I couldn't have dreamed that I would have done, especially in the way that it all unfolded. And it has taught me so much. It has taught me so much about this community, and I am proud to be in Lakeville, and I am the newest member of Lakeville on the board, and with having my daughter in this district, I will be around, and you will still see me being your cheerleader and rooting for the great work that is happening here. And I'm just really, really grateful for working with each of you.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been fantastic. Cinta?
Well, first of all, I hate public speaking, so I had to write all my thoughts down on paper. But to start off, I would like to thank God for the opportunity to serve the students, teachers, parents, and residents of Lakeville. It has been quite an honor and privilege to be part of a rapidly growing and high-spirited community.
Well said.
So as I was reflecting on the things I was able to take part of during my tenure, which was just a year, a little over a year, I can't help but express my gratitude to Dr. Van Zyl and the entire district staff and administration. This is an amazing team, and they work hard behind the scenes to ensure the students in this district are loved, appreciated, and feel a sense of belonging. So thank you to you guys. My fellow board members, we all have different backgrounds, life experiences, and ways of thinking, but I have really admired all the gifts and God-given talents each of you have brought to the table. Robin, we did not get to sing Kumbaya by a campfire, and thankfully, for David's sake, we did not get to do a trust fall. But I have really, really appreciated the passion and your desire to team build that you bring to this team. And you've devoted much of your time to hearing from the community, and you've made a genuine effort to get to know people and understand them. So thank you for that. David, you're a strong advocate for special education and always make sure inclusivity is incorporated into new practices, programs, and decisions affecting the student population. You also bring a much-needed sense of humor to the board. And if I could leave you with a word of advice, speak into the microphone.
I will.
He turned it off. He turned it off.
I was trying to be nice. I will. Don't need a microphone.
Judy, Terry, and Kathy, your guys' years of experience on the board have been vital to the function and effectiveness to this board, and I have loved to get to know each of the unique perspectives you all offer. Kathy, you continuously devote and advocate your time for the students to access an equitable education. And even though your service to the community as a board member is coming to a close, the district would greatly benefit with your continued involvement in other areas. Thank you for the 29 years of service.
Thank you.
Terry. Not only are you like a big brother, like a big brother.
old brother. Grandpa.
I love that you bring your experience of being in the classroom and school building to the table, and it shows in how you ask questions, present solutions, and think through decisions during work sessions and board meetings. You bring such a unique perspective to this board that not every member will possess, but it is such an important one. So thank you. Judy, you routinely express the importance of community engagement and involvement, and that is a component that is so vital for the success of this district. And you are also my mentor. So I want to give you my personal thank you for allowing me to grow into my role and guiding me with each step. I have really appreciated any time I've called you, no matter what time it is, you've been able to answer all my questions. And I want to congratulate Carly, Bree, and Brian, Carly, Kim, Bree, and Brian as the newest members of the Lakeville School Board, for you guys were called for such a time as this. It is my prayer that each of you will step into this position with an open mind and open heart and always keep what's best for the kids on the forefront. And I also want to thank the special people who I've met along the way. They have become lifelong friends, and if it wasn't for me serving at this time on this board right now, our paths would have never crossed. So thank you.
Well, you guys all, thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right.
Can I make
Kathy,
a comment?
yes.
Yes. I want to thank you all for the kind words. I'm just humbled by the comments, and I had to write down my thoughts so I don't ramble. And mine are not as funny as yours. But I really felt I needed to encapsulate and say some things over the past years. I'm incredibly grateful to the 194 communities and districts who have supported me, and even those that maybe haven't over the course of my board service. Representing the community and focusing on the education and needs of our children have been an honor that I will continue to appreciate for the rest of my life. I think of the accomplished administrators, the staff, so committed to the education of our children in the district, building our children's confidence, the superintendents, the administrators, everyone that I have worked with and been along the side of, just absolutely phenomenal, great educators, and we are very blessed to have you working with our children in the district. The Lakeville Area School District is an integral part of our community. It is the primary reason driving a high quality of life for our area, the growth and the success, as well as providing education and opportunities for all of our children. And the support of the schools depends on our residents and communities. Without that tangible support, including the monetary support through referendums and levies, the schools cannot do what needs to be done for education and to meet the needs of our children and of our democracy. As a retired person on fixed income, I appreciate the burden placed on us, especially the financial ones for those in my demographic and others. But my thought is of those children are our future, and we need them to be productive, contributing, successful members of society. And we have learned from our past, starting in 2006 to 2017, it only takes a failed levy or two and a matter of 1 or 2 years to pretty much tear a district apart, and it takes a long time, probably 10 more years or more, to build it back up. And that has been our past history and our experience, and it affects our children's educational opportunities and their futures, and it also affects our community's progress. And that's why I think we need to really take this very seriously. I have been very proud of all the boards that I have served on, and each year it's a new board, especially when you get new members. We always asked for what the district needed, when it was needed. We tried not to inflate it for more than what was needed, and I was always very aware of the tax impact, as well as my fellow board members, the timing of the bonds, the referendums, and focused on how to do more with less. This is, as we've heard tonight, there's a significant ongoing part of planning and partnering with our 194 community, which can take a great deal of time. Three very specific concrete examples that I can give, although planning goes on continuously, that have been critical to the success of the district and the children, are the years it took to plan and build. And it took approximately 9 years from when we really started talking about South and doing the demographics to open South. And it took about 22 years to get the pool at Century. It also took from like 1999 to 2005 to execute the grade shift, which I think is so absolutely incredible for our kids. And we launched that in 2005. It takes time, it takes steadfast vision and work, and just to accomplish and support these goals. For our children to flourish and learn, it is critical to have a welcoming environment where each child feels valued and has good experience. Our strategic plan is based on this, the daily experience of the child in school. Public education is a critical part of the success of our children as we partner with their parents and families, preparing them to fully participate in our community, county, state, country, and the world. And yet public schools do depend on the support of the whole community. Many times opinions and judgments about education in schools are based on educational, personal experiences, as well as perhaps incorrect information or from when we went to school. We must prepare ourselves, keep ourselves educated, and prepare our children for the society and the world they will be joining as young adults. It is critical to give each child a solid educational foundation for a world that is changing and for work that will exist in the future but does not exist now. I have at least one child out of my 5 who is working successfully and almost exclusively in an industry that did not exist in its current form when she was in high school here or even when she was in college. And I just think we have to keep that in mind because of how things are changing and the amount of knowledge that's coming forward. I have had 5 children go through the district. I am on my 3rd wave of grandchildren. My first wave of grandchildren have all graduated from college and are now been working several years in different industries. I'm very proud of them. My second wave of grandchildren are in both of our high schools. And so I have cougars and panthers running around my house all the time. And my 3rd wave of grandchildren are now approaching or are in our elementaries. And I'm just really proud of how they and my 5 children have gone on, but each of those children have experienced and have benefited from the programs in our district, all the way from special ed to the talented and gifted, the Ignite programs, the AP classes. I can't go through all of them because we have so many, but there has been just huge value of what it has offered to my kids and what they are able to contribute. It brings me then to the board. Board work is governance, not manage, not controlling. It takes a lot of time, self-discipline, and working together. The stability of the district depends on it, and the board coming together as a team. It means that although we each have our own experiences, values, opinions, and education, our decisions need to reflect what is best for the district as a whole and for all children, not our individual child or situation. And I know how hard that is. I have actually had to make decisions that my family did not view as very favorable. And it took them a little while to forgive me when they felt that it was adverse, but they did understand why it was happening. I really appreciate how this board has worked to come together and shared our common ideas, and I really respect each and every one of you for your ideas. Board coming together, it means that the district cannot do everything for every child. However, it needs to do as much as reasonable and possible within our constraints. The board works as a whole with the superintendent. It doesn't mean that we don't want to hear opposing opinions, either from each other or from the public, that we don't want to advocate for different options, and we don't want to hear concerns from the community members. We actually do. We do want to hear what has to be said, and we want to look at all sides of an issue. What this means is that when we come together respectfully to do our work, and once a course is established, we need to go forward with one voice and work with the administration. We learn, we understand our strategic work, especially as a team, and set policy, advocate resources, set goals, hear from the public, do advocacy, and plan with the administration. It involves the what of governance, not the how. It is honorable work that has a totally different role than city council, legislatures, and so forth. I must thank each of my fellow board members, and I truly mean this, that I have worked with and learned from over my 8 terms. So many to list, but I remember each one, and I will especially remember my last board that I've worked with. I thank, though, the candidates who have run for these positions, whether they have won or lost. It's incredibly hard work. It's expensive. It takes time away from your family. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to run a campaign and to go through an election. And you all have done that, and I know, Robin, you haven't, but you've still, except for the election part, you gave everything else. I appreciate their willingness to put themselves out here, out there, to run, and to also be available to serve the district. Thank you, Cinta, who did join us last November, and Robin, who joined us in January. I really appreciate your experiences, and also my other current board members and those over the past 30-plus years. I am so grateful to each of you. So now, although I am disappointed I'm not going to be here in January, I do look forward to the future, to 2023, and to the future of the board with new members, Carly, Kim, Brian, and Bree, as they join the 3 of you, Terry, Judy, and Dave. The district has several major issues, which we certainly have been talking about, looming currently and on the horizon within the next several years, that's going to require some long-term vision and board work and direction that the board will be able to provide. We have an excellent strategic plan to implement, and I will be supporting the board and the district in their upcoming work and wishing them the wisdom as they tackle the future needs of our children and our district. Thank you to each of you, all of you, and wishing you a wonderful holiday and a Happy New Year.
So, thank you.
And thank you for your patience with me.
Thank you. So with that, I will be looking for a motion for adjournment.
We got one quick thing, superintendent's report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll be real quick, I promise.
Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, you're fine. Just a couple of quick items for you. Don't forget that tomorrow is Bill and I, our task force are meeting.
Yep.
Facilities and finance, so that group was there. Also, I think Dr. McDonald and I are meeting with our first student group tomorrow, which is at North or South?
South.
It's only 2 high schools,
It's
one
at-
of them.
it's
We
at
meet with one
South 'cause
tomorrow.
that's for my students,
Okay, we meet with
yes.
South tomorrow and then North the next day, so it'll be interesting to hear what our students have to say. Also, as somebody told you, now's your cue, Dave. You didn't sneeze. Attendance is important. Even though we're getting close to the Christmas holiday and break, our students need to be here unless they're sick. And if they are sick, make sure that they stay at home. But we need to be mindful of that.
I was going to say that. I was going to say that, but he did it for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holidays you're celebrating. And be safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to 2023. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. And with that, then, motion for adjournment.
I'll move.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Schmitz and a second by Director Lewis. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for joining our meeting and enjoy the holiday season with your family and friends. Stay safe, long night, and take care. And thank you again, Cinta, Kathy, and Robin. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
There's also the box that Kim has over there, and she may give those to you.